Alright, so it's time to start working on the main gear assembly and the auto rotation gear, as well as getting the main shaft installed and assembled on the frame. The next thing I'm going to do after that is work on getting this motor in. So let's start with the main gear here. This is actually a two-piece pre-assembled unit. At least in my kit it was pre-assembled. And essentially what you have is the auto rotation gear and the main gear, and they're just held together. You can pull them apart. There's this sleeve that slips into this one direction bearing, and basically what the one direction bearing allows is the auto rotation gear to spin one direction but not the other, so it doesn't go backwards. And basically that allows you to free up with the motor stopped. It allows the rotors to spin freely. Okay, so that's how that works. Along with that, you have a screw and a nut that is going to go right through here and then through your main shaft. Now, I'm embarrassed to admit I've already lost the little nut that came with this. I had to go source a replacement. I ended up getting a 4-pack of these from the local hobby store. I have no idea how it happened. I saw it in the bag. It jumped out apparently and fled the scene before I could start building. So I actually had a work stoppage so I could go get this another little nut for this. So be careful, these little parts, they're tricky. So we also have this little bushing, kind of a spacer deal that goes on top of this assembly. And it just fits on top. Now I believe it's directional as well, so if you try and put it on and it doesn't go down easily, just flip it over. And then for me, it pops on nice one way but not the other direction. So that might be a gotcha that you should know about. So with that on, this whole assembly is just going to slip through and rest underneath these main bearings. Just like that. Now we have the main shaft, and we talked about this before when I assembled this rotor here, but I have an adjustable collar on this particular kit. I know that the Align models tend to come, at least in the 450 size, with a fixed collar, and then you use shims to adjust the play. I actually kind of like this design because it means I can just snug it up, set some screws, and I'm good to go. I don't have to worry about fitting it with shims. So at any rate, this is loose, and I want it to be loose for now. And then I'm just going to slip this right down through the two bearings, and then all the way through. As you can see, I just stabbed it all the way through to the through the main gear. Now I'm going to back it out. And as I do that, let's get you some zoom here. So I'm going to hang on to this auto rotation gear and then turn the main gear and just kind of ease it back out until I get all of my holes aligned. Whoops. Right there. Now with those aligned, I can drop this little screw through. Now I found it's easier for me, other than trying to work my fingers down in there, which I can't do very well, is I found it, for me, easier to set the screw on the driver and kind of use my finger just to kind of hold it in place. Then I'm only stabbing one whole finger through, and it was a lot easier for me to do it that way. So basically, just get that through there, and you may have to wiggle it a little bit to get it through. I find also kind of turning it, even though it's not threading through, kind of turning it allows it to work its way through. fairly easy. And then basically I'm through. I can see the end of it popping through the other side. You want to kind of give a tug to make sure that it's actually going through the main shaft and you didn't miss that hole. If you have the main shaft pulled up too high, it'll look like you're going through, but the main shaft isn't actually in there. So that's how I get that through. Now the other part is to get the nut on that side. And the way that I think I'm going to do this is essentially I'm going to push that screw back in just a touch, and then I'm going to set that nut right in there. So here's another thing I'm going to do, just to cheat, is I'm just going to pull off this flybarless holder there, and that gives me some room to work my hand in there. And I want to get that nut set in there and aligned up. See if you can see that. There's like a little recess, an indent that it goes into in the plastic, and I get it set in there, and once I have it in there, I can just hold it with my finger, and then while I'm holding it against where it's seated, I can then screw in, and it'll, once it gets threaded, it'll bite, and then it'll be good to go. So that's how you do it. Now that I have it done, I want to put some Loctite on there. So in my opinion, the best way to do this, I'm just going to drop that nut out of there. The best way to do that is to just put a little bit of thread lock on the actual end of that screw that's poking through. Oops, I just blobbed a whole ton of it on there. Oh well. And then once again, you want to just get that little nut set in there, and it'll find its way into that detent there that's cut out just for it. Let me wipe off all the extra. And then again, as before, I'm just going to hold it with my finger, keep some pressure on it till the threads take, and once they take, I can let go, and the act of tightening it down will actually just suck it all in there. So this you don't want to make too tight. You just kind of want to snug it up. Otherwise, I'm told that it'll warp this whole assembly. Now my assembly wasn't perfectly steady to begin with. There was a little bit of wobble, and I noticed it even before I tightened things up. And that seems to be fairly normal, or I guess typical. I'm not sure if it's normal. Fairly typical. So I'm just going to roll with it for now, and then if I run into problems with it later, I'll deal with it. So now that I have it attached on the bottom, what I need to do is snug down this collar to remove all the play, because right now there's plenty of play. As a matter of fact, you know, with this thing completely loose, I have a lot of play. So basically what I want to do is kind of put some upward pressure. I'm going to zoom back a little bit. Some upward pressure on the bottom of the gear assembly, and then a little bit of downward pressure on that collar. Not trying to squeeze it as tight as I can, but just remove basically all of the gap that's there. The other thing I'm going to do is put some thread lock on this little set screw. So let me get one of these thread locked. And again, by removing that little flybarless mounting plate, I can get my thumb down in there and hold this thing together. And I'm just basically just lightly pinching the two together so that there's no play. I'm not trying to apply pressure I'm just removing all the space, no air between those components. And then now that I got one thread locked, I'm going to remove the other one. There's 2 set screws on this, so remove the other side, apply some thread locker, and I don't have to worry about holding it together anymore because the first set screw has it held in place now. Snug that down, and basically what I have is absolutely 0 up and down play and a good free spinning main gear. And if you look at, get this out of the way so it doesn't get hung up on anything. If you look at kind of how I have a wobble in that main gear and auto rotation gear, it's possible that the wobble could come from too tight down here. I experienced the wobble already. I just think it's a little bit out of round. You know, I could possibly try and replace it with another main gear and see if I can get rid of that wobble. But I also know people on the forums who have said that they have a little bit of wobble and it doesn't really seem to impact the heli at all. So I'm just going to have to see what I want to do with it. But for now, this is the kit I've got. I'm not saying that the Taro main gears are, you know, of inferior quality. I just know that I have a little bit of wobble there. And it's an up and down wobble. But hopefully it doesn't look like there's any side to side, like it's out of round or anything like that. So that's the main gear. The next thing I'm going to do is put the motor in. So I'm going to put this piece back in here so I don't forget about it. And basically it just, like I showed you when we did the frame assembly, it just kind of pressure fits in there, those holes. So that's back in. And once we get these bottom mounts together, it will squeeze that in so it won't be a problem anymore. But I'm glad I can take it out right now because it gives me an opportunity to get some reach in there. So that's that, and next is the motor. All right, so let's work on the motor. Got a couple parts here for the motor. First thing, I guess, is to talk about the ends that I had to solder on, these little bullet connectors. These were, they came in the box with the motor. There we go. But I did have to solder them on and put on the shrink tubing. Now, hindsight, if I did this again, I would color code the shrink tubing. It came with red shrink tubing. I used the red, and for some reason I ended up using a black. I don't remember exactly what happened there. Either I don't know. I have no idea why. I'll probably remember one day. But either way, I ended up with just shrink tubing. The color of the wires is what's important for the connections. But the interesting thing is, let me grab the ESC. The ESC, all the wires are the same color, and the shrink tubing designates the color code. Now the ESC, this is a Hobbywing Platinum Pro 40 amp. It came with the female ends already on the ESC, so I didn't have to do anything there. All I have to do was make sure I had the male end, and those fit just nicely. It's exactly the same sort of a connector. They fit nicely in there. So the female side of these connectors that came with the motor, I didn't have to use, so I'm just going to keep those as spare parts. In hindsight, if I would redo this again, I would color code the shrink tubing on this so that it made sense when I was doing shrink tubing color coding from the ESC. So I could just put black shrink to blue shrink and, you know, red shrink. But in this case, it's the wire color goes with the shrink tubing color. So anyway, that's kind of one thing I would probably do better, differently, if I do this again, would be, and I didn't have any blue shrink tubing, but I do now. I actually got a little package that had blue, black, and red in it. So now, and I may, if I get bored one day, go in and split these off and redo them with the right colors just to clean it up. But just know I would do that better. if I was redoing it. So maybe you can you know, learn from that. I didn't realize how important the color was going to be, but it does become important here because that's what you're using to gauge what you connect to. So it would be really easy for me to accidentally connect the black to the blue because I'm matching shrink tubing. So I have to really think black to black wire, and then, which is in this case a red shrink tube. So anyway, just save yourself some grief, get some color coded shrink tubing and do it that way from the start. All right, so I have the motor. I also have this pinion. This is the 12T pinion that came with the motor. The helicopter kit came with a 14T, I believe, which is way too many teeth for my my 6S build. So if you remember me talking previously, I am using a 6S instead of a 3S battery pack, and you know, I have all the compatible parts. What that means is I have a lower kV motor. This is a 2000 kV. You can definitely go lower than that in the 1700 kV. Even lower would probably be better. But I need to get a lower tooth count to keep the head speed down. So this is a 12. I could probably easily go a 10 or 11. I'm not going to go buy one. The 12 will work fine. And then what I'm going to do is use the governor on my fly barless system. The Roadbird G31 fly barless system has a what appears to be a nice governor. Or alternatively, you can use the governor on the ESC. ESCs generally are not known for having great governors. The reason I was originally going to buy the Yep 45 amp ESC from Hobby King was it's got a fairly well known governor. The Platinum, the Hobby Wing Platinums, you know, I think it probably has something to be desired from a governor perspective. The ESC itself seems to be pretty good. Governor, not so much. So I'm going to count the fly barless system is going to have a good governor. So I'm going to use that to control head speed, which means I can just use this 12 tooth pinion. So there are, I have a little set screw here, but thankfully I haven't lost yet for the pinion. And then I've got these two screws and washers down here for the actual motor mount. So the motor is going to mount from the bottom up this way. On this particular motor, and I'm not sure if it's this way for all the motors, only two of the screws are going to fit, only two of the holes are going to fit the screws that were provided with the kit. So for example, that one fits, but this one, the hole is too large. The screw just slips right down into. So what I want to do is keep track of which holes I'm going to use. So I'm going to use these two holes, and I'm going to keep track of the one, it's the one to the left of the wire bundle that I'm going to screw into. Now, I don't know if this is unorthodox or not. Quite honestly, I haven't seen this done before, but I've only seen a few build videos, so I may be missing, this may be a common thing. I'm not going to put the pinion on yet. I'm going to just mount the motor up in there loosely, and then I'll put the pinion on, and I'll show you why here in a second. And it made sense to me. It may be the hard way, but I think it's the easy way, so that's the way I'm going to do it. The other thing I want to note is when you get this up in here, in order to align those screws with the slots, keep in mind you do want to use the slots, not these little round holes. In order to align them, these wires actually press pretty hard against the side carbon fiber of the frame. So you would think they would poke straight out the back, but they don't. They cock over to the side like that. So I'm going to start it by just picking one that looks like it's going to go. I'm not going to put washers on these yet. The reason being is once I get everything kind of tightened down and set for adjustment, then I'll pull one screw out at a time, put some thread lock on it and the washer, and then go that way. But right now I don't want to have to deal with the washers just to pull them back apart again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, this is the bigger hex. So I'm going to get that on the end, and I'm just going to I'll show you this. I'm just going to set it down inside that little hole there. And then from the bottom, I'm going to push up. And all I want to do is get one of these screws to take, just like that. So as you can see, remembering that only 2 of these holes actually are threaded right for this particular screw. I've got that one in. The next one I have is going to be over here. And the way I have to do that is kind of shove those wires up against the side, and you can see that that screw hole come available. If you think that the wires are going to come straight out, you'll spend a lot of time chasing holes. You got to make sure that you push that over. And in some cases, it feels like there's quite a bit of force for that. Once I have that there, I'm kind of holding it with my hand, and I've got my thumb up against. I'm kind of like pressured in there. Then I can get the other screw onto my driver, and then I'll just slip it down in there and hopefully get it started pretty easy. So that was pretty easy. So now I have both screws in there, and everything is nice and loose. I can wiggle back and forth, and I'm good to go there. So what I want to do now is pull it as far to the back, actually the front of the helicopter, as far away from the main gear as I can. Because when I put the pinion on, I don't want it to have contact with the main gear at all, because that's I'm not ready for that part. So the reason I didn't want to put the pinion on at the same time or before I put the motor in is because you want to get the pinion to be the same height as the main gear so that there's some consistent contact there. Now you can put the pinion on the motor, put the motor in, check the fit, and then adjust it after that, which is totally reasonable. I just thought it would be easier just to put the pinion on while I have the main gear and the motor aligned. That way it'll just be right the first time. So a couple things to note that are important if you're going to do it the way I'm doing it. Feel free to do it any way you want. If you're going to do it the way I do it, you have to rotate the motor so that the flat part of the spline there is facing you. You can kind of see as I turn it, it's rounded and then it's flat. That's where the set screw is going to go, and I just want to make it easy to find the set screw. The next thing I'm going to do is put the pinion over the top with a set screw hole facing me, just like that. That way when I push down, it's already in alignment. And then I need to, and actually I'm going to tighten up these screws just a bit. I'm going to hold them away from the main gear. So I'm going to tighten these up against the motor mount. And the reason I'm doing that is because now I'm looking at travel up and down, and I want to make sure that I have that motor snug up against the motor mount so that I get an accurate measurement. So then what I'm going to just do here is just push this pinion down and then push it down and stop when it's the same height as the main gear. And that looks pretty good right there. So the key is you want to make sure that you've got full coverage of the teeth, and you don't want this this fatter collar here below the teeth to actually come in contact with anything up near the main gear. So that's what I end up with right there. And now that I have it in there, I can take the set screw, put some thread lock on it, and basically just slip that set screw in there. Make sure it doesn't cross thread. You can turn that motor if you need to get it lined up just right. Just turn the bottom of the motor. Snug it in, and you're good to go there. Now, when the main gear spins, see how much wobble I have in that? Whether or not I decide to leave it that way long term is beside the point. The key though for this procedure, in my opinion, is I want to make sure that on all parts of the wobble, the main gear is in full contact with the pinion. So basically, in some places the pinion may be a little bit above the main gear, but it should never be below. So I think that that's probably good right there. So that's that. The next thing now we can do is actually deal with this connection between the pinion and the main gear. Now what that's going to require is loosening these screws up enough on the motor mount to be able to push and adjust the motor. And as you push it, these wires, because they're pushing out on the side, are going to make it a little bit harder, so you can actually kind of tug them, push them up in there, and it will snug up in there. So there are several ways to adjust this properly. I assume experienced builders will just be able to do it by feel or by sight. I am not one of those. So I'm going to use the trick of 20-pound paper, which seems to be a fairly simple way to do this. So basically what I'm going to do is grab a piece of 20-pound printer paper, which is what I actually happen to have in my house, and I will use that as a guide. All right, so I've got this little strip of paper, and I'm just going to slip it down between the main gear and the pinion. I'm going to tilt this upwards a little bit so you can see it. And then basically, from here, what I'm going to do is just apply pressure to the top of the motor and push it up against that main gear. And I want to kind of wiggle it so those teeth engage, and you can see how the paper wraps around. And I'm using the frame to kind of give me something to grip onto to pull in the reverse direction of the pushing. Once I have that, then I can take these two screws and tighten them down. So now I've got this piece of paper stuck in my gear assembly, and I can basically rotate that out, and you can see, first of all, the paper has the indentions from being pressed into that assembly. And then let's take a look at what we end up with on the gears. So we have, let's do it this way. So we're looking for just a little bit of play, but not much. And I think that might be good. Get that rotor out of the way. So that was using a piece of paper to press it in there. That's probably a good angle to see. And basically what I want to do here, and I'll set it back down to make it easier on me, is I just want to spin this through and make sure it spins. And I'm going to use I can't use it, I'm going to go backwards with the rotor and just make sure everything spins. There's no binding. It doesn't feel like it's getting hung up anywhere. And that all feels pretty darn good right there. Okay, so now that that's in there, what I want to do, just take another look. I think that's good. So now I'm going to remove one of these screws. I put them in kind of tight, so I do know that if I remove one, hopefully the other one will hold it in place. That's what I'm counting on here. So get this guy out of here. And then I can't forget these little washers. So the washer goes on, and then of course thread lock onto the end of the threads here. Thread lock are such an interesting thing. It's like I have feast or famine. It's either not coming out at all or blob, it all comes out. So I have my thread locked screw with a washer, and basically what I'm going to do is just get that back through. And tighten it down. Okay. Double check things, looking okay. Do the same thing with the other side. You can see why I don't want the servos in for this, because the servos are going to go right here where I'm working. So this just makes it easier to not have to worry about them being in the way. All right, and then one more. Again, I say it a bazillion times, make sure you're not cross-threading any of these. So if you feel any pressure that feels unnatural, make sure you stop, back it out, and redo it. All right, so that is the motor. Just double checking and making sure everything still looks good. And I'll let you see what I end up with here. That's what I end up with. And I think it looks pretty good. So that is the motor installation. So this thing is really starting to take shape. And the next thing is we'll put these servos in that we've been holding off on. All right, so let's get these servos in. So basically I have the heli frame here. Oh man, it's starting to look good. Starting to get some stuff in there, make it look like a helicopter. All right, so basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna prop this up at a 45-degree angle if you just kind of let it rest. This is kind of easy because I don't have the tail boom in yet, but just kind of have it propped up at a 45-degree angle, and then I'm gonna set these servos in place. And remember, I've labeled these L, C, and R. So R is the right side of the helicopter when looking from the rear, which means because I'm going at this backwards, R is going to be on the left side. But if I flip it over and I look at it from the back of the helicopter, this is the right side. So that's how that's going to go. So make sure you get that right, otherwise your settings are going to be off in your flybarless system. What I want to do here, and I found this is kind of the easy way to do this. Let me give you a little bit of zoom here. So the wires are going to go up, okay, and the arm is going to go out like that. So if I put this in, I can set the arm at 90 degrees where it's going to go, and this first one I can kind of just slip in there just fine. And you can see how those ball links align here, here on the servo arm, and then somewhat on the swash. So that's where those ball links are going to go. So getting that first one in is pretty easy. So I'm just going to go ahead and mount that in there with screws. I've got these little bitty black screws, these machine screws here. Put the washer, there's some silver washers in my kit, make sure you get the washer on there, and then after you have the washer on, then you'll want to throw a little thread lock on it, because I'm going into to metal here, and basically gonna screw that in, making sure I don't cross thread. It's a little bit more challenging because of these wires are kind of getting in the way. If you need to use a different driver, maybe the 90 degree to get in there, you can do that. I'm going to loosely set that in there and then grab the bottom one. Okay, and the bottom one, I'm going to do the same thing. Just kind of ease in there, if you can see that. All right, that one's fairly snug. And gonna finish this one here. Snug it up, and then back down to the bottom to finish snugging it up. Okay, so that's the right servo, and I got this little arm out here, which is where you want it. Now I'm going to put on the left servo. Now the left servo is a little trickier because you can't just push it through like I did the other one, because now there's no room to manipulate. You've got to figure out how to get this arm through. So what I found is if you point the arm straight up, just like that, point it straight up on the top of the servo, remember the wires go up, then you can slip it up and inside, and then the arm, actually make it like point it a little bit to the right. And see how that arm pops through the top of that motor mount or the bearing mount? So as I go in, just goes like that, and then I can slide that down and then mount it from there. Again, washer, screw, thread lock. Being very careful not to cross thread, especially with these that you have to hit at an angle because of that wire. It's very easy to put that in wrong. I haven't done it wrong yet. I can just feel how easy that would be. Just the pressure of that wire is enough to kind of put you at a funny angle. Okay, so I'm going to just turn this upside down. Goes in fairly nice. Get it close to snug, and then I'll flip it over. Snug the top, and then go back to the bottom and finish snugging it down. All right, so there we go. There are the front two cyclic servos, the left and right. My arms are out with the balls out, so that's how I want that to be. And now I'm going to work on this back rear. I'll set that like that so you can see it. Just lay this on its side. And for this one, again, it's labeled C for center, so I know which way it's going to go. And the arm is going to point to the back. And you can just set it in there like that. This is one of the great things about this version 2 kit from a line that Taro obviously has a very viable clone for, and that is the fact that this rear servo mounting is much easier than I guess in the older versions. So thread lock, washer. Did the bottom one first on that. Again, the wires are going up, and the servo arm, the gear, is up at the top. Light pressure. Snug, and I go back, finish off snug in the bottom one, and there we go. We now have our 3 servos, our motor, our main gear, our main shaft, and our prop. So and then our rear. This is looking awesome. We're getting really close to having this a completed helicopter. So the next thing I'm going to look at doing here is I need to put on this, basically I think I'm going to end up putting on the battery tray here pretty soon. This anti-rotation bar is going to have a plastic mount here. I'm going to put on the tail boom, put on the skids, and of course I got to put on the blades here pretty soon so that I can make it actually look like a helicopter. So that's where I'm going next. Appreciate you watching, and I hope this is helpful for you. It's definitely helpful for me.